Hey everybody, before the episode I just wanted to say that I was feeling a little bit off when I recorded this, a little bit ramblier than usual, a little difficult. I had a little bit of difficulty focusing on what I was doing, so this episode really isn't up to my standards, but I thought putting it out would be better than not putting any show out at all. So just bear with me a little bit, and I don't think it's too bad, but just bear with me a little bit. Alright, let's go to the episode. Hello, Internet, and welcome back to the Experimental Cataclysm. If you don't know, this is the show where we talk about some of the new things that have come to the experimental version of Cataclysm over the last few weeks. And often there are spoilers, but this week there really aren't any spoilers. There's really actually not a lot to report at all. So let's just jump into it. First up, so why are we looking at the Discord screen? Well, because of this right here. So basically there's been a feature freeze. And if you don't know what this means, I guess technically I don't know 100% what it means. But to my understanding, what it means is that they're gearing up for the next stable release. You know, where most people are familiar with 0 Point Danny, which is the most stable version of Cataclysm, or is generally regarded as the current most updated stable version of Cataclysm. And then we often talk about the experimental version, which is the version that's being released on a daily basis. So what they're doing is they're freezing everything that's coming into the project, and they're saying, let's focus on bug fixes, let's focus on taking care of some of the issues in the game instead of generating new content. And then when we've felt that we've gotten the game to a pretty stable place, we will release a new stable release, and then we'll go back to working on it the way we typically do, or they typically do. So my guess would be, so here Oren announced this on the 5th. I would imagine that they're trying to get this done before Christmas. Now that's not based on any knowledge that I have from the dev team. That's just my personal take. If it were me, you know, I know not everyone who works on the project is an American, but as Americans, we have Thanksgiving approaching. We have Christmas and New Year's approaching, which I guess applies to everyone everywhere. But, I know that people like Kevin has a family, and, it's one of those things where it's like people around the holidays tend to spend more time with their families and do less work. And so I would imagine that they're trying to bang this out before the holidays really hit. My guess would be by Christmas, but again, that's pretty much just speculation. So we really aren't going to be getting a lot of new content over the next couple of weeks, basically, or months, or however long it takes. Basically, if it's not on the approved list for 0 Point E, there's probably not going to be a lot of work done on it. And even if work gets done, say I pick up a project today of adding 10 new locations to the game, they probably will not merge those into the game until after that stable release. That's just because everything right now, they don't want to introduce new bugs, they don't want to introduce new issues. They want to focus on ironing out the problems that we currently have so that they can release a more stable version. I think this is really, really good because we often recommend to people to start playing on 0 Point D instead of experimental. But the most recent experimentals have made the game a lot easier, and I think that, so like for instance, if you're playing 0 Point D, you don't have access to the slower monster evolutions, which was something that made the game a lot easier for new players. We changed the default start date. You could change that manually in 0 Point D, I believe, but a lot of people don't know that you can do that. We changed the season lengths. There are a lot of things that make the game a little bit easier for players. So I'm excited to see 0 Point E, because then we can start recommending that to new players and they can get an easier introduction to the game. So I'm very excited to see that. I think it's going to really help out new players and people who are just discovering the game. So yeah, great. Keep up the good work, dev team. Hopefully, you can iron things out. You guys do great work. We love you. We don't always say it, but we love you. So, because of the feature freeze and things, it's just not that much that really stood out to me this week. There are a lot of bug fixes that are coming down, lots of little changes that, improve the game in some way, but aren't really stuff that we need to talk about. Most of the bug fixes are like, oh, well, we had a math issue, or, oh, well, this was previously doing this, and now we changed the logic very slightly. And it's like, that's not very exciting to talk about. So we're just going to talk about some content-ish stuff, and then probably, honestly, if this stable release stuff lasts for several weeks, we might not really do a show until we start getting more content updates. So I'm going to keep an eye on things, but we'll just play that by ear. And then I imagine that after the stable releases, there will be a backlog of new content, and then we, of course, will talk about that. Or maybe there won't be. Maybe people are putting their projects on hold just to address bug fixes and things, and there really won't be a content backlog. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So first up from IP Cyborg, we got fixed zombies smash ground when they chase you. Now, if you've played Cataclysm for any length of time, you have seen zombies that, rather than actually following you around, choose to punch the ground because they're just so frustrated at how elusive you are. So basically, this is just, again, we talked about just a minute ago, it's a small change in the logic. Hopefully, this will reduce the amount of time that zombies spend smashing the ground. Now, I saw that this was 18 days ago, and I've still noticed that they're smashing the ground a little bit. So I don't know how much was actually fixed here. It says 2% chance. I feel it feels more than that, but that might just be because I've really only been playing Cataclysm for the Enemy Spotlight series, which if you haven't checked out the Enemy Spotlight series, you should go check that out. And hopefully there's a card up here in the corner of the video. So in those instances, I'm spawning dozens and dozens of enemies at once. So maybe it just seems more because of the number of enemies that I'm encountering. But yeah, we all hated this. I mean, I guess it's beneficial to the survivor that they don't chase you. They'll just punch the ground. But yeah, it's really disappointing when that happens to me. I just feel like that's so silly. So we got a bug fix for that. Hopefully it works as advertised. So thank you for making that change. Next, from Night, we got a feature that adds an auto lockpick on examine. So you're probably familiar with, let's say you have a crowbar in your inventory, you walk up to a door that's locked, you push E to examine the door, and it would automatically crowbar the door open. As far as I know, that's exactly what this does, only with lockpicking. So if you have lockpicks in your inventory and you examine certain locked doors, they will automatically check for picking the lock. So it's a quality of life improvement. I know I've actually heard people, like, it sounds like something that I would never think of because I never really use lockpicks, but it is something I've heard people mention multiple times, like, why can't we just have it be the same way that the crowbar works? Again, this is only on specific items that can be picked. So let's say you go up to a door that can be pried open and lockpicked open, it's still only going to check for the pry. It's not going to check for the lockpick. So there is some limitation to this, but there are certain doors that can't be pried open, but can be lockpicked open. Like, for instance, the door on the gun shop, I believe, which I think is T door metal pickable. Not that you care, but I believe it's this door that's on the gun shop. And this is the door that cannot be pried, but if you examine it, it would prompt you, it would auto lockpick. So it does only apply to certain terrain tiles, so it's not probably what you want, but they would need to combine the pry function and the pick function into the same action, and I don't think that work is being done. So it is a limited thing, but I think it's cool, and I think it is something that people wanted, so pretty neat. Okay, next we have several changes that are going to affect butchering for meat, basically. From this individual, we got the human fat. Previously in the game, if you butchered a human creature, it would give you human meat, it would give you chunks of fat, and it would give you organs. And the human meat, of course, is treated as human meat. If you eat that, you get a malus for eating human meat if you're not a cannibal. It can't be used for regular meat recipes. It only could be used for the human meat recipes. But the fat was regular fat, and you could eat the fat without consequences. This is if I'm understanding right. It's been a long time since I butchered a human in-game. But it would produce regular fat, and you could use that for regular recipes. You could cook it and eat it without any penalties, all that stuff. And then, of course, organs are the same way. Last I checked, there were no human organs, which really bothers me, but that's, someone will do it eventually. And so now this individual has made it so you no longer will receive regular fat from a human corpse. you will receive a special humanoid fat that has the human flesh tag and will give you that same stat malice, or I guess it's just a mood debuff. I don't think it actually affects your stats. So it should provide you with that human meat. This is great. I think that this kind of stuff needs to be done. Like I said, I think the organ meats should be done as well, for this exact same reason, because they should still give you the malice of eating a human being. People can't cheat their way into free, especially because fat has such high calorie content. I would imagine it's pretty rare that you would butcher a human just because need that meat. But people did, and it existed, and it's kind of an exploit. So it's nice to see that getting taken care of. Okay, now next we have a pretty major change. We have giant animals drop mutant meat, which has negative effects if relied upon. Now, this was originally tossed out there probably like a month or two ago. And this guy said, like, oh, well, mutants shouldn't drop regular meat. They should drop a different kind of meat. It should have really bad health ramifications, etc. And I was initially very, very against that. I thought that, like, it felt very much like an arbitrary decision, like, oh, well, there's too much meat available to the player. I want to cut that down. And that really bothered me because I hate arbitrary decisions. Ultimately, that's not what it was. Once I saw that this person was actually putting in a lot of work to make this change, they were doing a lot of research about, instead of just saying, oh, well, it's going to make you super sick, they started working with the vitamin system, which I thought was a really clever way to do things. Okay, you probably don't understand what I'm talking about. Basically, now, let's just talk about the change. I was against it originally. Once I saw how serious the individual was taking it, that they were putting in a lot of work, I actually swung around to their side. I think it's a great idea. And so basically now when you kill a creature, let's say you kill giant naked mole rat, you're going to get mutant meat instead of regular animal meat that we would normally get. And the logic behind this is that these creatures are being forcibly mutated by the blob. If you don't know lore and all that stuff, we're not going to get into spoilers, but they're being forcibly mutated. And because of this, it's not normal tissue like an animal would have. It is like tissue that is loaded up with, they just call them toxins, right? It's a negative vitamin that will accumulate in the player, and you really don't want in your body. So basically, mutant meat, as opposed to regular meat, it has like half the calories of mutant meat, regular meat. It has a toxin that builds up in your character's system. Here it has as many calories and vitamins as normal meat per unit volume. It has a gross texture, which results in negative fun. And it has a new vitamin called toxins. And so if you really want to min-max, you can safely process the toxins of up to 800 calories of mutant meat per day. That's a pretty high number. I believe your character needs something like 2,500 calories per day, but obviously that varies depending on your physical activity in the game. But 800 calories from mutant meat still allows you to consume a lot of mutant meat without any real negative side effects. Mutant fat also has its own thing. You guys can deal with that if you want to. I'm not really big on min-maxing, and I don't believe I should encourage people to min-max. But basically, toxins will build up in your system. They will cause negative health effects. They'll cause painful headaches, lowered immune response, which I assume would be your health modifier. It doesn't say exactly what that... Oh, it won't drop below negative 10. Okay, if you eat nothing but mutant meat for 4 to 5 days straight, you will develop moderate effects, which will appear in the ad screen, which is important because I think it's important to relay that. Because if you're a new player and you had no idea that this was really bad for you, and it didn't show up in the ad screen, you might not understand why your character is doing so poorly. This can cause muscle spasms, seizures, health degradation, which would increase in an even lower health modification, headaches as well. And if you eat it for a long period of time, your nervous system is malfunctioning, almost like it's being torn apart from the inside. Full body convulsions, headaches, seizures, muscle spasms, and the health system even worse. And the leukocyte, I don't even like the leukocyte breeder. I hate that this CBM exists. It feels very cheatery to me. Like, it just feels like it completely negates a system in the game. And admittedly, the health system is not a great system. But, I really hate things that can completely circumvent a game mechanic. So I don't play with it, so I don't know it well enough to know what some of this stuff means. But so yeah, basically, when you eat this meat, it creates a toxin buildup in your character's system. The more you eat, the worse it gets. And I really like it because you can eat it in small doses and be perfectly fine. You know, I really like this change. I really hated it initially, but I've definitely come around, and I think that this is a good change. I do think it makes it harder for new players, but most new players aren't going to be dropping most of the giant animals anyway. And we have a list of animals that it affects. The only thing I think that really new players would be killing on the regular would be giant cockroaches. Everything else is a bit beyond them. Maybe a frog, but I think frogs can actually mess you up. But everything else is pretty much stuff that most new players aren't going to mess with. You know, most new players, if you see a spider, you're probably just dead. Like, you're not going to be able to kill the spider. Ants and bees and wasps are the same way. If a wasp gets a hold of you on day one and you're not really familiar with Cataclysm, you're dead anyway. So it's not really going to affect new players that much, I don't think. And I really like it. Really like this change. Well, that was a lot of fun. I just recorded a whole section about Mutant Meat, and then found out that I was recording the wrong window. So, yes, we've spawned. I need to force some video into this episode, so we're going to go ahead and kill this naked mole rat, and we're going to butcher it to see what we get. Previously, we would have gotten meat and regular fat and all that good stuff, and you'll see this time we got chunks of mutant fat and chunks of mutant meat. And both of these things both their descriptions imply that you should not really eat this on the regular, and the fact that they're labeled as mutant meat. It is worth pointing out that both the butchery refuse, which you can eat, you just really shouldn't eat butchery refuse from any creature, but you can eat the butchery refuse, and as of this recording, the organ meats are still regular organs. So you can safely eat the organ meats without having to worry about the mutation aspect of things. So yeah, you can still eat the organs. I imagine this will be addressed in the near future. We're just talking about multiple changes to the meats in the game. I imagine that organs will follow suit, although in my experience, the organs have been largely neglected by these sort of changes previously. So so let's look at the meat. We have chunk of mutant meat. Meat from a heavily mutated animal. It has an unsettling, loose, and spongy texture, but smells mostly normal. There's strange tangles and formations in it that don't appear natural at all, bits of bone and hair crusted up inside the muscle, as if trying to form another organism. Still, it seems digestible, at least if you cook it and remove the worst parts. And you'll see at the bottom it says this food is unappetizing in a way that cannot be covered up by most cooking. I would imagine that that's something they set up to maintain the negative enjoyability. And then we have scrap of mutant meat. Tiny scrap of meat from a heavily mutated animal. It smells a bit odd and has bits of hair and bone mixed in that seem like they grew inside the muscle itself. Still seems digestible, at least if you cook out. I really like the descriptions on these because it really does sell that this is not a normal creature. This is not just, oh, you found a really big mole rat. This is something that is having its body ravaged by mutation. And I think that really sells it. The bits of hair and bone into the tissue, I love that. So great job. Whoever wrote that description, you did great. Sometimes I read, I play other games and I read descriptions and I'm like, man, they really missed the mark. This is great. I love it. So still can eat the organ meats. Really should avoid mutant meat, but you can see here we can consume it. You'll see the calorie count is lower. Normally a chunk of fat or a chunk of meat has 320 calories, maybe something like that. And same with fat. Oh, well, that's still an enormous amount of calories. But yeah, so, you can still safely eat the organ meat. I would avoid the regular mutant meat and the mutant fat. And again, you can eat butchery refuse, but I really can't recommend that. So, all right. Next, from the same individual, we have add mutant humanoid meat dropped by, you guessed it, humanoid mutants. This is Davy Bones, who did the mutant meat change. Basically, this just creates a human version of mutant meat that will now be dropped by mutant humanoid creatures. Can't really think of any off the top of my head. I think we did come across, I think it was called an enhanced mutant or something like that. Oh, experimental mutant probably is what I'm thinking of. It literally says right in front of me, and I'm an idiot. And it functionally is very similar to the human mutant meat or the regular mutant meat. It basically, the gist of it is that it gives you the debuff for eating human meat, and it gives you the negative health ramifications of mutant meat. And that's really all there is to say about it. I would really recommend you never eat mutant humans anyway in the game unless your character is specifically built to do so. I imagine that maybe in the future there may be some mutations that would allow you to safely consume mutant meat, but that's just speculation. But unless you have a character specifically built for eating humans, you really shouldn't be eating humans anyway. And now that the mutant meat has been added to the game, you should generally avoid mutant meat. So it's just a relatively small change compared to, like, once you know the concept of the mutant meat, this becomes an afterthought almost. It makes a lot of sense that this exists. So good job, Davy Bones. Thank you for your contributions. And then finally, this is something that I personally don't think is a big change, but I have seen some complaining about it. From Codeologist here, we have a more realistic temperature, precipitation, humidity, and pressure weather change. Now, what a lot of that means for the player is actually not super relevant. Like, I don't know how pressure affects me in the game. I've never considered it or really thought about it. Mostly what we're going to be focused on and realizing is the precipitation changes. And that is the thing that I'm seeing most people complain about. I guess they balanced temperature as well and humidity as well, but really the thing that's going to stand out to the average player is the rain and snowfall. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but the gist of it is that this individual took real world values, actual statistics on precipitation and things like that, and then worked them into the systems that exist in the game. So the main thing that people are going to notice about this is that rain is a lot less common. And I think that's a great change, because previously, I mean, if you played Cataclysm for any length of time over the last couple of years, you've noticed that there are weeks where it rains for 8 straight days, and it seems like you get it's unrelenting and it's miserable. Can't work on your vehicle because your character's constantly wet. It's so obnoxious, in my opinion, to have it rain for weeks on end. And the reality is that, yeah, that can happen in real life. Maybe in New England, I'm not super familiar with New England weather, but that's not common. That's not an every week occurrence. It's something that maybe happens once a year where it will rain for 7 days straight. So it just strikes me as a bit silly. And so, yeah, it's been addressed. It's mostly in my gameplay, what I've noticed is that it rains a lot less, which I personally think is fine, but some people are upset about. I can see if you're a new player and you rely exclusively on funnels for your water sources, I could see this being an issue for you. But the reality is that there are so many other water sources in the game that once you kind of learn there are other places to get your water. I don't think when I first started playing, I used a funnel all the time. That was how I got my water. And then once I realized, there's water in every single toilet in the game. We had that big forest change a few months ago, several months ago, where ponds now will spawn in there are water tiles in the forest. There are pools, a lot of places in the game. There are a lot of water sources that you can get access to. So I think that this could negatively impact new players who might be frustrated that their funnels aren't working as much. But I think that that's kind of a good trade-off, because it also prevents them from being constantly wet, and that affects your temperature and all kinds of stuff. So I like using real-world values for this. I like that they actually did the research and put the work in. I do think it's going to frustrate some people, but I really like it. And I don't really have much to say about it, because I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the numbers and, well, how frequently does it rain now, and exactly how much does a funnel accumulate now compared to a week ago. I actually don't know those numbers. I don't care to do that research. You can do your own testing if that's something that's really a priority to you. But to me, it just seems like a good change. It's going to be good. I don't have anything else to say about it. I think it's a good change, and I don't really get why people are complaining. But since people are complaining, I thought I would share this particular change to make clear that this is what happened to your reign. I don't know. I really don't even want to talk about it. So, yeah, I think that's probably going to do it. I'm sorry if this episode was a bit off. I'm feeling a little out of it today, and I maybe should not have recorded, but hopefully I don't come across too nonsensical. But yeah, we'll be back when there's more content to discuss, when there's something a little bit more major that I can really sink my teeth into and learn about. But yeah, so thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I'll be back with more in a couple of weeks or so, and I'll see you next time.